page 16 of your program, as well as in a special display in the registration area. Today, we recognize Douglas Price, Executive Vice President and CEO for Hotel Technology Next Generation, also known as HTNG. To detail Douglas's accomplishments, I'd like to call up Nick Price, CEO for Nexus Technology and inductee into the HFTP Technology Hall of Fame.
Well, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. This is a great moment for me. Very proud to be here. And we are all here today, this morning, to honour the newest member of the HFTP International Technology Hall of Fame, Doug Rice. Now, I have known Doug for 12 years. In fact, it's fair to say that I inherited Doug when I started at Mandarin. And at that time, he was a consultant advising the company. For me, this turned out to be one of the very best things, the greatest fortune that could have happened. Doug helped me kickstart my career in hospitality. And I know, in a similar fashion, calmly, with authority born of deep knowledge and an instinctive understanding for our industry, Doug has helped many of us, hoteliers and vendors alike, across the full spectrum of hospitality, and with an equally beneficial effect. So thank you, Doug, for helping me. Now this year, this month in fact, marks an important anniversary. HTNG was born 10 years ago, in June, and it would not, in fact, it could not have been born without Doug. Some of you may know that the founders of HTNG first met in Doug's backyard back in that steamy June in 2002. However, Doug's contribution to HTNG runs so much deeper than that. Doug has guided and led the organization, and he has grown it from startup until today, where it has become undeniably a success and a positive force for good right across our industry. Today, HTNG technologies can be found almost everywhere. You won't often find an HTNG name on the product, but if you look deeply, if you ask the people involved, many of them, probably all, will acknowledge that the ideas, the friendships, the relationships, they were formed in the crucible. That is HTNG, and that, in fact, is HTNG's legacy, the ability for us all to produce and to buy better products today than we had all those years ago before HTNG started. So thank you, Doug, for that. And Doug carries the full weight of HTNG. He carries the burden, collectively, of our wants and our desires, and collectively our hopes for a better future. And of our hopes, Doug, thank you, because you have more than fulfilled them. You've done a fantastic job for our industry, and everybody here is in your debt. Now, I could say many things here about HTNG and Doug's contribution to our industry, but in fact I won't, except for one. I want to talk about Doug's style. Now, for this, I beg of you to please allow me to use a somewhat musical metaphor. Doug will never be found out front. He is not the solo trumpet of the jazz quartet, but he's there nevertheless, on the piano, providing essential arrangement and harmony where needed, knowing just when to step in and when to step back and let the soloists shine. And like many of the great session musicians, Doug may never be famous, but his work can be found almost everywhere. And it is most often, and is best expressed through the success of others. Doug's capability to work with everyone, to seek partnerships out of confrontation, and to build alliances where most thought that none were ever possible. These are the virtues through which Doug demonstrates to us all what can be achieved through clarity of vision, through leadership, and through purposeful execution. Doug, I am proud to call you a friend, and I am so delighted to welcome you as the newest member of the HFTP International Technology Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, no one deserves this award more. Doug Rice.
Thank you very, very much for that kind introduction, Nick. And thank you to HFTP and to those of you who wrote many letters of support for my nomination. This is truly a wonderful honor. What a great event HITECH is, isn't it? And I've been here every year since 1991, and it's always one of the highlights of my year. The most important HITECH for me, though, was 10 years ago, this week, in 2002 in Chicago. The weekend before that, 9 smart but frustrated people organized a meeting to talk about the challenges that we saw in our industry, and we tried to find some solutions. And in the end, we reached an obvious conclusion that the industry simply did not have enough confusing acronyms that started with H. So on top of HFTP and HSMAI and HITES and HEDNA and HIDA and of course HITECH, we invented HTNG. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and I definitely wanted to help. But I was doing fine as a consultant in those days, and I really wasn't looking for a new career. So it wasn't until a few years later that I realized that running an association was apparently going to be my destiny. So I'm not quite sure what accomplishments the selection committee had in mind when they chose me for this award, but I'd like to think it was for helping our industry to look outside of itself, to become smarter at technology, to adopt IT principles that the rest of the world took for granted, but ones that were almost unheard of in hotels at least 10 years ago. Things like architecture, and platform, and open standards, and converged networks. There were really 3 key principles that the rest of the technology world was following that led to the founding of HTNG, and the same principles continue to guide us today. Principle number 1, spend your IT development money on what makes you different. For the basics, where you're pretty much the same as your competitors, buy it from somebody else. This works for hotels, and it works for vendors. HTNG is all about reusing basic stuff that already exists, or collaborating to share the costs if you do need to develop it. Modern architectures not only encourage this, they demand it. Number 2, use open standards. They empower you. Open standards give great systems access to the information and capabilities of other great systems. And they do it cheaply and without creating information silos or fragmented data. And if you think open standards are going to kill your secret sauce, then consider this. Chefs make their secret sauces mostly from ordinary ingredients, ones you can find in the grocery store. Well, there's an open standards aisle in your grocery store, and best of all, everything in that aisle is free. You can use open standards as part of your secret sauce. Just add your own choice of ingredients and prepare it according to your own secret recipe. Number 3, experts who share knowledge are smarter than even the smartest expert working alone. HTNG makes it easy to share knowledge. As one chain VP tells me, I come to HTNG meetings because of all the smart people there. And when I go back to my office, all that knowledge makes me seem a whole lot smarter than I really am. So 3 things. Spend your development resources on what makes you different, use open standards, and listen to groups of experts. Now, 10 years ago, we started talking about these principles, and we designed an organization from the ground up to help bring them into the hotel industry. And a few of you started to pay attention. And now, 10 years later, we have more than 3,000 people from around the world that are members of HTNG. Now, as a nonprofit association, we're here for the good of the industry. We have to charge membership dues in order to pay the rent. You don't have to pay them in order to get a lot of the benefit of what we do. For example, this week we launched our new Smarter Buyer's Guide. It's on our public website. You can't miss it from our homepage. And that means it's available to anyone. It tells you how to use those 3 principles when you're buying any of about 3 dozen different types of hotel systems. It's based on the consensus of groups of experts. Remember principle number 3? Whatever kind of system you're buying, it tells you what standards and best practices are available and why they might or might not be useful for your needs. It will help you to make the smartest possible buying decision. So use it to ask your vendors if they're doing things the best way for you. And if we can get enough hotels asking the right questions, then the vendors are going to have a much better shot at building the right solutions. So for me, it's been an amazing privilege to lead this movement and see so many great ideas come out of it. And I particularly like seeing the vendors that take these ideas, make them their own, build on them, improve them, and bring them to market. So I started making a list of all the people who've helped to make HTNG a success so I could thank them today. These are people who have donated hundreds, in some cases even thousands of hours of their time, often over a period of years, developing thousands of pages of standards and best practice documents, and making a huge contribution to our industry. But I can't thank them all today, because it turns out that list is just way too long. I even tried limiting it to the most important contributors, and there were still more than 200. So today, I'd just like to recognize a few of the people who were instrumental in helping me succeed at my job, each in different ways. Gebhard Reiner at Hyatt, Mark Headley at Wyndham, Matthew Dunn at Interwest, Barry Schuler, Carl Wilson, and Jim Peterson from Marriott, Todd Thompson from Starwood, Gustav Schrills and Tom Conaffey from IHG, Jane Derment at Marcus and Monica Nerger at Mandarin Oriental, John Ng and Fraser Hickox and Brian Steele and Sophie Hong, Alan Perini at Open Travel and Alan Young before her, Frank Wolf at HFTP, Bob Gilbert at HSMAI, and my fantastic staff, John Wembiahe, Jay Rosamilia, Brian Larson, Kylie Reese, Josephine Blake, Tammy Craig, and Greg Kinley. I couldn't do it without their help. But there is one person without whose support and guidance I can honestly say HTNG itself would not survive. It was his experience with another organization that gave us ideas about how to get vendors to collaborate. And as a CIO, he was tireless in driving his vendors to work together through HTNG. So I'm privileged to have known him as a client, a colleague, a friend, an HTNG officer, and a constant source of inspiration for more than 13 years. Nick Price. Thank you, Nick. Last but most important, I want to thank my wife of almost 23 years, Melanie, and my daughter, Leanna. Without Melanie's support and the understanding that this job would require many late nights and weekends and too much time away from home, I could not possibly be standing here today. So with that, I would like to thank you very much and wish you a great high tech.